The Aurelian Club did not just sit on the corner of Fifth Avenue. It loomed there, a limestone fortress of old-world exclusion that had fended off the changing tides of the city for over a century. To enter it heavy, brass-reinforced oak doors was to step out of the frantic pace of 2026 and back into a time when power was whispered over snifters of brandy and deals were sealed with a nod between men who shared the same tailor. Inside the grand ballroom, the atmosphere was suffocatingly elegant. The ceilings, arched and adorned with hand-painted frescoes of Roman triumphs, soared 40 feet above a floor of polished Carrara marble. But the true crown jewels of the room were the massive crystal chandeliers. They were gargantuan, tiered structures of light that hummed with low, electric vitality, casting a diamond-sharp glow over the 300 guests below. Every movement in the room was reflected 1,000 times over in the crystal prisms, creating a shimmering, restless energy. Danielle Cross stood near one of the fluted marble pillars, her presence a study in intentional stillness. She wore an ivory silk suit, the lines so sharp they looked architectural. It was a bold choice for a room that usually demanded black tie conformity. But Danielle wasn't there to conform. She was there to audit, against the dark, age-stained mahogany wainscoting. She looked like a beam of light. In her hand, she held a slim, black leather portfolio. It was unadorned, devoid of any logo or brand, yet the way she held it, tucked securely under her arm, suggested it contained the weight of the building itself. She watched the room through the natural realism of an observer. She saw the way the waitstaff, mostly young people with tired eyes, moved like ghosts, ignored by the titans of industry who sipped champagne and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. She was looking for one person in particular, Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was currently the center of gravity, well near the bar, as the interim chair of Vance Logistics. She was the face of a legacy that was currently rotting from the inside out. Vance Logistics had been the backbone of American shipping for 80 years, but 3 years of mismanagement and a series of disastrous prestige acquisitions had left them bleeding cash. They were 48 hours away from a catastrophic credit default that would wipe out 10,000 jobs and $32 billion in market cap. Eleanor didn't look like a woman on the brink of ruin. She looked like a woman who owned the sun. She was dressed in a gown of white silk that mimicked a hero's palette, but lacked its soul. Her diamonds were loud, catching the chandelier light and throwing it back aggressively. The expansion is a certainty, Eleanor was saying to a small circle of hedge fund managers, her voice carrying that specific tone of inherited confidence. Vance Logistics doesn't just survive, we dominate. By Monday, we'll have the liquidity bridge finalized, and the skeptics will be looking for new jobs. Danielle stepped out from the shadow of the pillar. She didn't rush. She moved with a measured, rhythmic pace that drew eyes simply because it was so different from the frantic social climbing happening around her. As Danielle approached the circle, the air seemed to chill. One by one, the hedge fund managers went silent. They didn't know who Danielle was, but they recognized the quiet authority she projected. It was the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. Eleanor turned, her glass of vintage Krug held halfway to her lips. She scanned Danielle from her shoes to her hair, her eyes narrowing as she performed a mental calculation of Danielle's worth. In Eleanor's world, a black woman in a room like this was either a server, a diversity hire assistant, or a lost member of the press. The press gallery is upstairs, dear, Eleanor said, her voice dripping with performative sweetness. And I believe they've already finished the trade pass for media. A few of the men in the circle smirked. A few looked away, uncomfortable but silent. This was a social jury in its rawest form, watching a public erasure and waiting to see the blood. I'm not here for the champagne, Eleanor, Danielle said. Her voice was low, melodic, and perfectly controlled. And I'm certainly not press. I'm the answer to the prayer your board has been whispering for the last 6 months. Eleanor's smile didn't just fade. It turned into a sneer. She stepped closer, invading Danielle's personal space. I don't know who let you in, but Vance Logistics is a firm built on heritage. We deal with institutions. We deal with names that are carved into the stones of this city. We don't deal with whatever it is you represent. I represent the $2.4 billion liquidity bridge that is currently sitting in a holding account. Danielle replied calmly. And I represent the only reason your family name isn't going to be a footnote in a bankruptcy filing by Monday morning. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the tinkling of the crystals in the chandeliers seemed to stop. The hedge fund managers looked at each other, their eyes darting to the black portfolio Danielle held. Eleanor felt the shift in the room. She felt her grip on the high ground slipping. In a desperate bid to reassert dominance, she decided to make the humiliation physical. "You are delusional," Eleanor said loudly, ensuring the nearby tables could hear. "And you are trespassing. This is a private gala for the stakeholders of this firm. You are neither a stakeholder nor a guest." Danielle reached out her hand. It was a final test, a chance for Eleanor to recognize substance over skin, to choose the survival of her company over the satisfaction of her prejudice. "Let's start over, Eleanor. Shake my hand, and we can go to the library to discuss the final terms. For the sake of your employees, don't make this a mistake you can't undo." Eleanor looked at Danielle's extended hand. To Eleanor, it wasn't a lifeline. It was a challenge to her entire worldview. She looked at the hand, then up at Danielle's steady gaze. Slowly, Eleanor tucked her hands behind her back, a gesture of pure, unadulterated contempt. "I don't shake hands with people I'm about to have removed," Eleanor announced. The words rang out, hitting the mahogany walls and bouncing back. Then, Eleanor looked over Danielle's shoulder and nodded. Immediately, 2 white security guards emerged from the wings of the ballroom. They were large, square-jawed men in tailored black suits, their earpieces glinting under chandeliers. They moved with synchronized, heavy-footed authority. They didn't ask for Danielle's name. They didn't ask to see an invitation. They only saw what Eleanor wanted them to see, a problem that needed to be deleted. "Ma'am," the lead guard said, his voice a gravelly rumble. He stepped between Danielle and the exit, his body language aggressive. "You've been asked to leave. Do not make this difficult." The second guard moved to her right, flanking her. The classic environment of the Aurelian Club suddenly felt like a cage. The white guards, the white CEO, and the white walls of the mahogany room closed in on the black woman in the ivory suit. Across the room, the natural realism of 2026 manifested. Dozens of smartphones were pulled from tuxedo pockets. The elites were filming. They weren't filming to help. They were filming the spectacle of a trespasser being put in her place. The glow of the phone screens competed with the ancient light of the chandeliers. "I told you," Eleanor whispered, leaning in so only Danielle could hear. "You don't belong in the light. Now get out before my men have to get physical." Danielle didn't flinch. She didn't look at the guards. She kept her eyes locked on Eleanor Vance. "You had a choice between your ego and your empire," Danielle said, her voice so cold it seemed to frost the air. "You chose wrong." The lead guard reached for Danielle's arm, his gloved hand closing in on the ivory silk. The lead guard's hand stopped less than an inch from Danielle's ivory sleeve. He didn't stop because of a change of heart, and he didn't stop because of the cameras. He stopped because the air in the Aurelian Club had suddenly changed. It wasn't the temperature, it was the frequency. Across the room, near the mahogany dais where the keynote microphone stood cold and silent, a man was running. This was not the dignified, measured stroll expected at the Aurelian. This was a frantic, stumbling sprint. Arthur Penhaligon, the chief financial officer of Vance Logistics, was white-faced, his silk tie askew, clutching a tablet as if it were a live grenade. "Eleanor, stop! Stand them down! Now!" Arthur's voice cracked. A high-pitched splintering of the room's forced decorum. Eleanor didn't turn around. She kept her eyes locked on Danielle, a triumphant, ugly smirk playing on her lips. "Not now, Arthur. I'm busy cleaning up the guest list. Our stakeholder here was just leaving." Eleanor looked at the screen. Arthur screamed, reaching her and shoving the tablet between the CEO and her target. The 2 white security guards hesitated. They were trained to follow the hierarchy, and right now, the hierarchy was screaming at itself. They loosened their stance, their eyes darting between the sweating CFO and the ice-cold woman in the ivory suit. Eleanor glanced at the tablet, her irritation ready to boil over, until she saw the red. In the high-stakes world of Vance Logistics, red was the color of death. On the screen, a real-time wire transfer notification was blinking. The header read, Meridian Horizon Capital, Emergency Liquidity Bridge. But it wasn't the amount that stopped Eleanor's heart, though the $2.4 billion figure was large enough to be felt in the floorboards. It was the status. Status, recalled. Reason. Termination of contractual goodwill morality clause exercise. What is this? Eleanor whispered, her voice losing its edge, becoming thin and reedy. Arthur, why is the bridge failing? It was supposed to be in the escrow account by midnight. It was in escrow. Arthur gasped, his chest heaving. But the source, the founding partner, she just pulled the kill switch. She's watching the room. Eleanor, she's here. Arthur's eyes scanned the immediate circle, landing on the only person who wasn't sweating, wasn't filming, and wasn't panicking. He looked at the ivory suit. He looked at the black leather portfolio. He looked at the hand Eleanor had refused to shake. His tablet hit the marble floor with a sickening crack. Oh, God. Arthur breathed, his knees buckling. Eleanor, what did you do? Danielle Cross finally spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden, vacuum-like silence of the ballroom, it carried to the very back of the room, vibrating against the crystal chandeliers until they seemed to hum in response. The handshake wasn't formality, Eleanor, Danielle said. She stepped forward, and this time, the white security guards didn't just move. They scrambled out her way as if she were made of lightning. It was a final audit. I wanted to see if the person I was about to give $2.4 billion to understood the value of the people who make this world turn. I wanted to see if you could see past your own reflection in these mirrors. Danielle opened her portfolio. She pulled out a single heavy sheet of vellum, embossed with a gold seal of Meridian Horizon. You told me you don't shake hands with people you're about to have removed, Danielle continued, her gaze sweeping over the social jury, who were still holding their phones up, capturing every second of Eleanor's disintegration. The irony is, I don't fund companies run by people who believe their heritage grants them the right to be small. Suddenly, the massive LED screens positioned behind a grand fireplace, meant to show the Vance Logistics 80-year retrospective, flickered. The images of black and white ships and sepia-toned warehouses vanished. In their place, a clinical, white screen appeared with the Meridian Horizon logo. Notice of liquidity withdrawal. Immediate freeze on Vance Logistics operating accounts. Credit rating. Junk status, effective immediately. The natural realism of the fallout was instantaneous. In the back of the room, 3 different board members began shouting into their phones. The classic dignity of the Aurelian Club was replaced by the raw, jagged panic of a sinking ship. You can't do this. Eleanor shrieked, her face turning a blotchy, frantic red. That money is legally committed. I'll sue you into the ground. Do you have any idea who my father is? Your father's name is on the building, Danielle said, stepping onto the small marble dais, reclaiming the space that Eleanor had tried to exile her from. But my name is on the checks. And as of this moment, the checks have stopped. Meridian Horizon is no longer a partner. We are now your primary creditor. And as your creditor, I am calling in the debt. Danielle looked at the white security guards, who were standing frozen, looking like statues of a forgotten era. Gentlemen, Danielle said, Ms. Vance is no longer the chair of this firm. As a majority debt holder, I am exercising my right to vacate the premises of all terminated personnel. Please escort the former interim chair to the coat check. She won't be needing her credentials anymore. The guards looked at Eleanor. Then they looked at the screens. Then they looked at Danielle. The transition of power was silent, but absolute. The lead guard, the same one who had almost touched Danielle's arm, turned toward Eleanor. Ma'am, he said, his voice flat, it's time to go. Don't you dare. Eleanor screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the sound of 100 notifications hitting 100 phones. The markets in London were opening. The news was out. Vance Logistics was a hollow shell. The guards took Eleanor by the elbows. They didn't do it with the same aggression they planned for Danielle. They did it with a cold, professional detachment of men who knew who signed their paychecks now. They led her through the center of the ballroom, her white silk gown snagging on a chair, her diamonds looking like cheap glass under the chandeliers. The crowd, the same people who had smirked and recorded Danielle's humiliation, now turned their cameras on Eleanor. The predator had become the prey. The viral cycle was complete. Danielle stood alone on the dais for a moment, the light from the crystals above washing over her ivory suit. She didn't look triumphant. She looked like a woman who had just finished a long, necessary day of work. She picked up her portfolio and walked toward the exit. As she passed Arthur, who was still staring at his broken tablet on the floor, she paused. "Tell the board they have until 8 a.m. to present a new leadership slate," Danielle said. "Make sure they don't pick anyone who's afraid of a handshake." She walked out through the heavy brass doors, stepping back into the 2026 night. Behind her, in the classic halls of the Aurelian Club, the empire was falling one crystal at a time.